Hello? You ever have one of those days where you just hate everything? Like, you just want to go to bed and not do anything. Like, you just, yeah. It's one of those days. So, today I'm going to read Artemis Fowl, Chapter 2 by Ian Corfler. Hopefully I'll make my day better and a little bit, make it yours a little bit better as well. So sit back and enjoy. And please like and subscribe. This is going to be a shit reading, but hopefully you like it. So let's go. Chapter 2, Translation. By now, you must have guessed just how far Artemis Fowl was prepared to go in order to achieve his goals. But what exactly was this goal? What outlandish scheme would involve the blackmailing of an alcohol-addicted sprite? The answer was gold. Artemis's search had begun 2 years previously when he first became interested in surfing the internet. He quickly found the more arcane sites, alien abduction, UFO sightings, and the supernatural. But most specifically, the existence of the people. Trawling through gigabytes of data, he found hundreds of references to fairies from nearly every country in the world. Each civilization had its own term for the people, but they were undoubtedly members of the same hidden family. Several stories mentioned a book carried by each fairy. It was the Bible, containing, as it allegedly did, the history of the race and the commandments that governed their extended lives. Of course, this book was written in Gnomish, the fairy language, and would be of no use to any human. Artemis believed that with today's technology, the book could be translated, and with this translation, you could begin to exploit a whole new group of creatures. Know thine enemy was Artemis's motto, so he immersed himself in the lore of the people until he had compiled a huge database on their characteristics. But it wasn't enough, so Artemis put out a call on the web. Irish businessmen will pay large amount of US dollars to meet a fairy, sprite, leprechaun, or pixie. The responses had been mostly fraudulent, but Ho Chi Minh City had finally paid off. Artemis was perhaps the only person alive who could take full advantage of his recent acquisition. He still retained a childlike belief in magic, tempered by an adult determination to exploit it. If there was anybody capable of relieving the fairies of some of their magical gold, it was Artemis Fowl II. Personally, I feel like Artemis Fowl II is like a fucking genius, like on par with Light Yagami from the Death Note. I feel like if they were in a room together, they would just like hate each other immensely. But like a couple of years ago, I think it was 2 years ago, the Artemis Fowl movie came out, and it was drastically terrible, where it made Artemis seem like such a pussy. He was such a twat. He didn't know anything. He was so dumb. He acted like a child when in actuality in the book he was a genius who not only concocted this massive plan, which we'll get into later in the chapters, but he also was able to finish it out on top. He knew what the fuck he was doing, and it's crazy to me that somebody could have read the book, the whole series of books, and decided to make a movie that just undermined the whole character of Artemis Fowl. I don't know. I just hate it. And you'll see further into the book, like, how genius, how mega mind Artemis Fowl II is. But the movie just doesn't go into it at all. It just undermines Artemis Fowl. It makes him look like a dumbass, like a twat, like a dickhead. And I wish that we had somebody that would be able to like adapt it into what it should be, you know? I'm sorry, I got off track. But, I felt like I should point it out. Okay. Uh, it was early morning before they reached Fowl Manor. Artemis was anxious to bring up the file on his computer, but first he decided to call in on Mother. Angelina Fowl was bedridden. She had been since her husband's disappearance. Nervous tension, the physician said. Nothing for it but rest and sleeping pills. That was almost a year ago. Butler's little sister, Juliet, was sitting at the foot of the stairs. Her gaze was boring a hole in the wall. Even the glitter of mascara couldn't soften her expression. Artemis had seen that look already, just before Juliet had suplexed a particularly impudent pizza boy. The suplex, Artemis gathered, was a wrestling move, an unusual obsession for a teenage girl, but then again she was, after all, a butler. Problems, Juliet? Juliet straightened hurriedly. My own fault, Artemis. Apparently I left a gap in the curtains. Mrs. Fowl couldn't sleep. Muttered Artemis, scaling the oak staircase slowly. He worried about his mother's condition. She hadn't seen the light of day in a long time now. Then again, should she miraculously recover, emerging revitalized from her own bedchamber, it would signal the end of Artemis's own extraordinary freedom. It would be back off to school, and no more spearheading criminal enterprises for you, my boy. He knocked gently on the arched double windows. Mother, are you awake? Something smashed against the other side of the door. It sounded expensive. Of course I'm awake. How could I sleep in this blinding glare? Artemis ventured inside. An antique four-poster bed threw shadowy spires in the darkness, and a pale sliver of light poked through a gap in the velvet curtains. Angeline Fowl sat hunched on the bed, her pale limbs glowing white in the gloom. Artemis, darling, where have you been? Artemis sighed. She recognized him. That was a good sign. School trip, Mother. Skiing in Austria. Oh, skiing, crooned Angeline. How I'll miss it. Maybe when your father returns. Artemis felt a lump in his throat, most uncharacteristic. Yes, perhaps when father returns. Darling, would you close those wretched curtains? The light is intolerable. Of course, Mother. Artemis felt his way across the room, wary of the low-level clothes chests scattered around the floor. Finally, his fingers curled around the velvet drapes. For a moment he was tempted to throw them wide open, but then he sighed and closed the gap. Thank you, darling. By the way, we really have to get rid of that maid. She is good for absolutely nothing. Artemis held his tongue. Juliet had been a hard-working and loyal member of the Fowl household for the past 3 years. Time to use Mother's absent-mindedness to his own advantage. You're right, of course, Mother. I've been meaning to do it for some time. Butler has a sister I believe would be the perfect for the position. I think I've mentioned her. Juliet. Angeline frowned. Juliet, yes, the name does sound familiar. Well, anyone would be better than the silly girl we have now. When can she start? Straight away. I'll have Butler fetch her from the lodge. You're a good boy, Artemis. Now give Mummy a hug. Artemis stepped into the shadowy folds of his mother's robe. She smelled perfumed, like petals in water. But her arms were cold and weak. Oh, darling, she whispered, and the sound sent goosebumps popping down Artemis's neck. I hear things at night. They crawl along the pillows and into my ears. Artemis felt that lump in his throat again. Perhaps we should open the curtains, Mother. No, his mother sobbed, releasing him from her gasp. But, no, because then I could see them too. Mother, please. But it was no use. Angeline was gone. She crawled to the far corner of the bed, pulling the quilt up under her chin. Send the new girl. Yes, Mother. Send her with cucumber slices and water. Yes, Mother. Angeline glared at him with crafty eyes. And stop calling me Mother. I don't know who you are, but you're certainly not my little Artie. Artemis blinked back a few rebellious tears. Of course. Sorry. Don't come here again, or I'll have my husband take care of you. He's a very important man, you know. Very well, Mrs. Fowl. This is the last you'll see of me. It had better be. Angeline froze suddenly. Do you hear them? Artemis shook his head. No, I don't hear any. They're coming for me. They're everywhere. Angeline dived for cover underneath the bedclothes. Artemis could still hear her terrified sobs as he descended the marble staircase. I thought it was an oak staircase. Yeah. Back in page 20 it says, Artemis scared the oak staircase. Perhaps they have like two staircases, or they have like a marble staircase on one side and an oak staircase on the other. Or maybe it's like oak steps and then like a marble railing, and so he just said both. I don't know. I feel like that's kind of like it's kind of like a typo almost. Anyways, the book was providing far more stubble than Artemis had anticipated. It seemed to be almost actively resisting him. No matter which program he ran it through, the computer came up blank. Artemis hard-copied every page, tacking them to the walls of his study. Sometimes it helped him to have things on paper. The script was nothing like he'd seen before, and yet it was strangely familiar. Obviously, a mixture of symbolic and character-based language. The text meandered around in the page in no apparent order. What the program needed was some frame of reference, some central point on which to build. He separated all of the characters and ran comparisons with English, Chinese, Greek, Arabic, and with Cyrillic texts. Even with Ogam, nothing. Moody with frustration, Artemis sent Juliet scurrying when she interrupted with sandwiches, and moved on to symbols. The most frequently reoccurring pictogram was a small male figure. Male, he presumed. Although, with the limited knowledge of the fairy anatomy, he supposed it could be female. A thought struck him. Artemis opened the ancient languages file on his power translator and selected Egyptian. At last, a hit! The male symbol was remarkably similar to the Anubis god representation on King Tut's interchamber hieroglyphics. In the book it says King Tut's full name, but I can't say it because of my accent. And it's a very convoluted word. So it's just going to be King Tut in this version. The male figure was remarkably similar to the Anubis god representation of King Tut's inner chamber hieroglyphics. This was consistent with his other findings. The first written human stories were about fairies, suggesting that the civilization predated man's own. It would seem that the Egyptians had simply adapted an existing scripture to suit their needs. There were other resemblances, but the characters were just dissimilar enough to slip through the computer's net. This would have to be done manually. Each gnomish figure had to be enlarged, printed, and then compared with the hieroglyphics. Artemis felt the excitement of success thumping inside his ribcage. Almost every fairy pictogram or letter had an Egyptian counterpart. Most were universal, such as the sun or birds, but some seemed exclusively supernatural and had to be tailored to fit. The Anubis figure, for example, would make no sense as a dog god, so Artemis altered it to read King of the Fairies. By midnight, Artemis had successfully fed his findings into the Macintosh. Damn, this is old. I haven't heard Macintosh since the movie Blank Check, and that's 1980 maybe? Jesus. All he had to do now was press decode. So he did. What emerged was a long, intricate string of meaningless gibberish. A normal child would have abandoned the task long since. The average adult would probably have been reduced to slapping the keyboard. But not Artemis. This book was testing him, and he would not allow it to win. The letters were right. He was certain of it. It was just the order that was wrong. Rubbing the sleep from his eyes, Artemis glared at the pages again. Each segment was bordered by a solid line. This could represent paragraphs or chapters, but they were not meant to be read in the usual left to right, top to bottom fashion. Artemis experimented. He tried the Arabic right to left and tried in the Chinese columns. Nothing worked. Then he noticed that each page had one thing in common: a central section. The other pictograms were arranged around this pivotal area. So, a central starting point, perhaps. But where to go from there? Artemis scanned the pages for some other common factor. After several minutes, he found it. There was on each page a tiny spearhead in the corner of one section. Could this be an arrow? Or direction? Go this way? So the theory would be, start in the middle and then follow the arrow, reading in spirals. The computer program wasn't built to handle something like this, so Artemis had to improvise. With the craft knife and ruler, he dissected the first page of the book and reassembled it in the traditional Western languages order, left to right parallel rows. Then he rescanned the page and fed it through the modified Egyptian translator. What follows is a bunch of the fairy language. It's really similar to like Egyptian hieroglyphics and stuff like that, as the book already pointed out. I am not going to read this. On the back of the book is basically like a breakdown of the English letters that match up with the fairy language. So you can like decode it if you want to do that. I am not going to post a picture of it because I am an idiot and I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to edit. So what you're hearing right now is literally a long stream. I'm not taking breaks. I'm not cutting. I'm not editing. I'm not doing anything. And that's probably noticeable because I'm not cutting I'm not covering my notable slip-ups in my language and breaks and shit like that, because I don't know how to do that, because I'm an idiot and I don't know how to use a computer very well. So you can look up this text and you can try to decipher it yourself if you want to see what it looks like, or you could just purchase the book. Ian Koffler deserves that. He is an amazing author and I really recommend reading the book and not just hearing my terrible rendition of it. Yeah, but so what follows is about maybe like 10 lines of text in the fairy language. I'm not going to decode it, but it looks like they do have a decoding coming up in this page, so I kind of just jumped the gun on this anyways. If you couldn't tell, I'm literally just reading along. I have read this book, but I read it quite a while ago. So I'm literally just reading along. I'm not I'm not going forward and reading the whole book and then, coming back and reading it for this, which is probably unprofessional, but I'm doing this just because. So anyways, what follows is about 10 lines of fairy text, and then I'm going to continue reading the book. The computer hummed and whirled, converting all the information to binary. Several times it stopped to ask for confirmation of the character or symbol. This happened less and less as the machine learned the new language. Eventually, 2 words flashed on the screen. Foil converted. Fingers shaking from exhaustion and excitement, Artemis clicked print. A single page scrolled from the laser writer. It was in English now. Yes. There were some mistakes, some fine-tuning needed, but it was perfectly legible, and more important, perfectly understandable. Fully aware that he was probably the first human in several thousand years to decode the magical words, Artemis switched on his desk light and began to read. The Book of the People, being instructions to our magics and life rules. Carry me always, carry me well. I am thy teacher of herb and spell. I am thy link to power arcane. Forget me, and thy magic shall wane. 10 times 10 commandments there be. They will answer every mystery. Curses, cures, and alchemy. These secrets shall be thine through me. But fairy, remember this above all, I am not for those in mud that crawl, and forever doomed shall be the one who betrays my secrets one by one. Artemis could hear the blood pumping in his ears. He had them. They would be as ants beneath his feet. That every secret would be laid bare by technology. Suddenly the exhaustion claimed him, and he sank back in his chair. There was so much yet to complete. 43 pages to be translated for a start. He pressed the intercom button that linked him to speakers all over the house. Butler, get Juliet and come up here. There are some jigsaws I need you to assemble. Okay, another quick interjection here. He said that there's an intercom button that links it through his entire house. What if? And this is like just my dumb brain thinking ahead. What if Senior Artemis and Lady Artemis decided to do it in Senior Artemis's office, and while they're getting it on, they accidentally push the intercom button. So says like Lady Artemis throws her hand back in order to be able to hold herself against the massive, throbbing. I'm not gonna say this word on YouTube. And she's just getting round on the desk, and she puts her hand out to support herself, and she accidentally pushes the button, and all throughout the house, the passionate lovemaking is just being echoed through the massive halls of Fowl Manor. And she's over there yes, and poor Artemis is oh my god. This is a total interjection and not important at all to the story, but I don't know, my very horny brain was oh shit, what the fuck? Anyways, let me get back to the story. Perhaps a little family history would be useful at this point. The Fowls were indeed legendary criminals. For generations they had skirmished on the wrong side of the law, hoarding enough funds to become legitimate. Fuck, I can't say that word. Legitimate. Fuck. Of course, once they were legitimate, they found it not to their liking, and returned almost immediately to crime. It was Artemis I, our subject's father, who had thrown the family fortune into jeopardy. With the breakup of communist Russia, Artemis Sr. had decided to invest a huge chunk of the Fowl fortune in establishing new shipment lines to the vast continent. New consumers, he reasoned, would need a new consumer good. The Russian mafia did not take too kindly to Westerner muscling in on the market, and so decided to send a little message. This message took the form of a stolen missile launched at the Fowl Star on her way past Murmansk. Artemis Sr. was on board the ship, along with Butler's uncle and 250,000 cans of cola. It was quite an explosion. They mean cans of cola as in cocaine, or cans of Coca-Cola, like the soda? I don't know. Since it's illegitimate, I feel like it would be cocaine. But anyways, the Fowls were not left destitute. Far from it. But billionaire status was no longer theirs. Artemis II vowed to remedy this. He would restore the family fortune, and he would do it in his very unique fashion. Once the book was translated, Artemis could begin planning in earnest. He already knew what the ultimate goal was. Now he could figure out how to achieve it. Gold, of course, was the objective. The acquisition of gold. It seemed that the people were almost as fond of the precious metal as humans, which I don't understand because gold is not even that much. Like, I know people like my neighbour used to hoard gold, but why? It's not worth that much. It's one of the most fragile metals. Like, you can't really craft anything. Anyone that plays Minecraft knows this. It's one of like the softest metals in existence, besides like tinfoil or aluminium. So why do people care about it? It's because it's pretty. So is platinum. So is obsidian. What the fuck? Anyways. Each fairy had its own cache, but not for much longer if Artemis had his way. There would be at least one of the fairy folk wandering around with empty pockets by the time he'd finished. After 18 solid hours of sleep and a light continental breakfast, Artemis climbed to the study that he had inherited from his father. It was a traditional enough room, dark oak and floor-to-ceiling shelving, but Artemis had jammed it with the latest computer technology. A series of networked Apple Macs whirred from various corners of the room. One was running CNN's website through a DAT, all in caps, projector, throwing oversized current affairs images against the back wall. Butler was already there, firing up the hard drives. Shut them all down except the book. I need quiet for this. The manservant started. The CNN site had been running for almost a year. Artemis was convinced that news of his father's rescue would come from there. Shutting it down meant that he was finally letting go. All of them? Artemis glanced at the back wall for a moment. Yes, he finally said. All of them. Butler took the liberty of patting his employer gently on the shoulder, just once, before returning to work. Artemis cracked his knuckles. Time to do what he did best. Plot dastardly acts. That's the end of chapter 2. First, I'd just like to point out, amazing book. I say this literally every chapter, and I'm going to continue to say it because it's amazing. Chapter 3 is one of my favourite chapters because it introduces Harley Short, which was definitely my book crush growing up. And she's all feisty. Oh my god, she's a feisty Irish woman with red hair and hazel eyes, like nice hazel skin with freckles, and yeah, and like later in the books, I think it's maybe book 5. There's this whole thing going on, and she ends up getting a blue eye, and to pair along with her brown eye, with a hazel eye, and then she has heterochromia, which is literally one of my favourite things in a human being, or an animal even. I had a wolf dog growing up, and she had heterochromia, and it was like the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. So, yeah. Definitely, I don't know why I went on that tangent, but I did, and it's there, and I'm not going to change it. First of all, because I don't know how to edit it out, and second of all, because I don't want to reread this entire chapter, even though it's only maybe like 6 pages. About. Maybe. Oh, it's like almost 10 pages long. Well, it's over 10 pages. Damn. Never mind. I'm a dumbass. It is 12 pages long. So yeah, I don't want to reread it. I'm already, 29 minutes into this recording. Imagine if I just sat here and tried to read this entire book in one sitting. That would be like 5 hours. That would be ridiculously long, and I'm not going to do that to you, so yeah. Anyways, chapter 3 is definitely my favourite. I'll try to get to it tomorrow. I know that I said previously in one of my other book reads that I was doing that I'm trying to do this every day. However, COVID is currently brain raping all of my people that I work with, all of my colleagues. So they're over there like coughing up their lungs and losing their taste left and right. And I'm the only healthy one because I'm the youngest out of everyone that's working. And so like everybody else is out, so I've just been working double shifts over and over every day. So this is my first time that I'm actually being able to sit down, relax, read this book, and just record this. I'll have this up later tonight. Um, Hopefully you'll enjoy it. Please like and subscribe, even if you don't like it. Fucking hit that thumbs up. Smack it. Smack it. Like it's a bad girl. Anyways, I will see you all tomorrow, God hoping. And I hope you enjoyed this chapter read of Artemis Fowl by Ian Kuffler. Have a fantastic day, and I will see you later.